Hello everyone, welcome to StudyIQ. So we will continue our discussion on economy. We are in the module International Organization. Okay, so we have actually started off with WTO, and in WTO when we started the discussion in the first session, we actually talked about GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. Okay, and then we have discussed about how GATT formed, when it is came into operational, and all those things we have covered in detail. Then we have discussed about various rounds of GATT. Okay, so we have seen that 1 to 7 rounds, the first 7 rounds, it's all related to the objectives of GATT. What was the objective of GATT? It was basically to promote world trade by reducing the trade barriers. So the first 7 rounds were all about the discussions related to reduction of tariff barriers to promote trade. But there was a difference in the 8th round, which is known as Uruguay round. In that, some new issues have been picked up, especially by the developed countries. So what are the new issues which have seen in the 8th round or in the Uruguay round? Those are related to, investment measures, intellectual property rights, environmental issues have been picked up, agricultural issues have come. Okay, so many different issues have been picked up apart from the trade issues. Okay, so if you see, GATT was actually established to promote trade, for discussing trade related issues, to reduce the tariff barriers, etc. But now more issues have been picked up, especially by the developed countries, and there was no consensus between the developed and developing. Now what happened is, it got stuck from 1986 to 1994, and Mr. Arthur Dunkel, the then DG of the GATT, he come up with a final draft final act, which is also known as Dunkel draft. Okay, so what he did is, he actually concluded this Uruguay round by incorporating all those requests, the suggestions which have been made by the developed countries, and also incorporating the genuine concerns of developing countries. And he come up with the draft final act, or which is also known as Dunkel draft, which is also known as Marrakesh Agreement. So the next round was in Marrakesh, and this agreement was signed, which is known as Marrakesh Agreement. And one of the most important provision of that agreement was the name and nature of the organization will change. So we have seen that GATT, the name changed to WTO, World Trade Organization, and the nature also changed. Till then it was related to trade. Now more issues are going to be discussed here under this platform, right? Trade related issues, not only trade related issues, intellectual property, investment, service related issues, agriculture, environment, non-agricultural products, everything will be discussed under WTO. Now if you see, earlier it was just a loose agreement when it was GATT, but now it is a proper organization. Earlier there was no judicial power, now there is a judicial power. So if some countries are violating the WTO norms, they could be sued in the Dispute Settlement Board of WTO. Okay, so that's what we have seen, and then we have discussed about the principles of WTO, the objectives of WTO, etc. And then we have started off with discussing the structure of WTO, and we have discussed about ministerial conference. So ministerial conference we have discussed in brief, and I've told you the important ministerial conferences we will pick up later. We will take that in terms of Singapore issues, Doha Development Agenda. We will talk about Bali Ministerial Conference, where the trade facilitation agreement was signed. Okay, we will discuss about that. And then we also have to talk about Nairobi, the ministerial conference, etc. So that we will do separately. After this session, I will come up with this ministerial conferences, important ministerial conferences we'll separately discuss. So we have talked about ministerial conference, and I've told you this is the highest decision making body of WTO. Then we have talked about General Council of WTO, which is a permanent body of WTO, which is situated at the headquarters, that is Geneva. And then we have talked about TPRB, the Trade Policy Review Body. Okay, and then we have also discussed about Dispute Settlement Board of WTO. So if any country violating, any member country violating the WTO norms, other country can sue this particular country who violated the WTO norms in the Dispute Settlement Board. And the Dispute Settlement Board, the DSP, have to come up with its decision within 18 months. And the decision of DSP could be challenged in the appellate authority, and the decision of appellate authority is final and binding. Okay, so that we have seen. And then we have talked about WTO agreements. So this is one of the most important session that we have done, and we have discussed around 45 to 50 minutes for this particular session. But we couldn't complete the agreements. In fact, we have done 2 sessions on WTO agreements. First session we have discussed about agreement on agriculture. So in agreement on agriculture, we have discussed about various cases like market access we have discussed. Under that we have discussed about tarification, national treatment, we have discussed about TRQ. Okay, then we have talked about domestic support, which is nothing but subsidy. There we have discussed about AMS, aggregate measurement of support, the requirements of AMS for developed countries, developing countries, base year, different types of subsidies like blue box, amber box, green box, etc. And most of the students always have a confusion, even if you read it from the textbook, what is the difference between blue box and amber box? Because both are containing the trade distorting subsidies. Green box does not have any trade distorting subsidies, but blue and amber have trade distorting subsidies. But in only one case, that is in amber box, AMS is applicable, blue box, AMS is not applicable. We have discussed in detail why is that so. Okay, and how is it misused by the developed countries. Then we have also talked about export subsidies. We have discussed about plant varieties related cases. Okay, then in the second session we have talked about TRIPS. Okay, so trade related, intellectual property related issues. Okay, so we have discussed about TRIPS, trade related intellectual property rights, under which minimum, at least a minimum standard of protection have to be given for 7 intellectual properties. What are they? Patent, copyrights. Okay, and then so we have to give minimum protection to patents, copyrights. Then we have geographical indicator. Then we have trademarks, trade secret, industrial design, and the layout of integrated circuit. Layout of integrated circuit means the transistors, capacitors, resistors, etc., the connection between them. That's what you mean by layout of integrated circuit. So all these things we have discussed separately in detail, and when we discussed about patents, we have discussed about Indian Patent Act, and we have also discussed about the amendment of Indian Patent Act to comply with the TRIPS norms. We in fact compared Indian Patent Act with the TRIPS norms, and I have told you the difference between Indian Patent Act and TRIPS norms, and later we adopted TRIPS norms. We are now totally in compliance with the TRIPS norms after the amendment in 2005. Okay, the ordinance was passed in 2004, but the actual amendment was in 2005. And we have started giving product patent also. Earlier it was only process patent. So I'm not getting into that now. This is just a quick recap of what all things we have done. So that's what we have done. So we have discussed under WTO agreements, 2 cases we have covered: agreement on agriculture and trade related intellectual property rights, in the agreement on intellectual property. Now what is left out? We have to cover this TRIMS. Okay, trade related investment measures. Then we have to cover GATS, general agreement on trade in services. This GATS and that GATT is different. That was general agreement on tariffs and trade. This is general agreement on trade in services. This is related to services. Then finally, so we have covered agriculture here. Non-agriculture is left out, right? Non-agricultural products. So that is what NAMA. Non-agricultural market access, okay, like petroleum products, etc. So that also we will discuss. So these 3 we will cover today itself. So before that, if you have missed out any of my videos, you can get in touch with me here. This is my Instagram ID, or you can join the Telegram channel, or you can see here, this is the Telegram channel. You can join here. You'll get all my videos over here. Economy, we have done close to 20 modules. Okay, so complete economy is actually covered with that, almost all the economy. And what you need to do is actually you need to update it by reading the economic survey. Apart from that, you don't want to read anything else if you're following it properly. Okay, then or this is my Instagram ID. These are my Facebook pages. Okay, so you can get in touch with me in any of this. If you need regular classes or online classes available with StudyIQ, or any mentorship program, test series, etc., you can get in touch with me here. Okay, so let's get started with this TRIMS. Okay, so this is okay, this I have already done this discussion. So TRIMS, trade related investment measures, trade related investment measures. Okay, so it is actually dealing with 2 points. When we're discussing about TRIMS, we need to discuss about 2 points. First one is related to tarification, second one is related to national treatment. The same 2 points we have discussed before also. I've told you what is tarification. Initially there is non-tariff barriers, it has to be made tariff barriers. So when it is converted to tariff barriers, again initially it should be high tariff, then there will be low tariff. Exactly the same here also. Earlier we have discussed in case of import. Now here we are discussing in cases of investment. So first one, tarification. Okay, so initially non-tariff barriers that should be made to high tariff, okay, then that should be reduced to, or tariff has to be reduced. So basically non-tariff barriers to tariff barriers. Once it is tariff barriers, initially there will be high tariff barrier, then low tariff barrier, and then free trade. That is what we have discussed in case of imports. Exactly the same here. Non-tariff barriers, then high tariff, then reduction in the tariffs. Second one, national treatment. So national treatment, what we have discussed already, if you remember that, this will be easy for you. What we have discussed is actually, if you remember, in case of import, the imported commodities should be treated like national product, right? See, is it possible to treat a national product and foreign product as same? It is impossible. But what this is saying is, if you are importing something, see, till the time you are importing, you don't want to treat so, okay? Once you imported and if it landed in the domestic market, then the national product, there should not be any difference between the domestic product and the imported product. Both has to be treated equally. That's what you mean by national treatment. At least after the foreign products entered into the domestic market, at least after the foreign products entered into the domestic market, there should not be any differentiation. Both should be treated equally. That's what you mean by national treatment. So here what it will be in case of investment. So the restriction on foreign firms should be kept within reasonable limits, okay? So there are restrictions on foreign firms, restrictions on investment on foreign firms. So here we are dealing with investments, so that restrictions has to be kept within limits and gradually it has to be reduced. That's what you need to know under national treatment. The restrictions for foreign firms have to be kept within limits. See, it's all about, what is the objective? To make the foreign firms on par with, domestic firms. So you treat the foreign firms on par with domestic firms, okay? So like in terms of export obligation, okay, and then in terms of domestic content requirement means use of local inputs. So if you see some foreign companies, there will be restrictions like you cannot import too much, because when you are importing, it is actually affecting our balance of payment, right? The dollar is going back, so we don't want too much imports. So what we say, that I've already discussed when we discussed about special economic zones in detail, we have covered this point. So initially in the beginning, when the foreign companies are coming, we are allowing them to import the inputs in the beginning, but with an agreement. We are given some tax concessions and many other advantages. What on the basis of what? Later all this has to be replaced by the domestic content, okay? So when I'm talking about domestic content requirement, it means the inputs which is used by, or locally produced inputs has to be used like that. That is what you mean by domestic content requirement. So let me write down here. I hope you understood this. So under this, restriction on foreign firms should be within limits. Restriction on foreign firms should be within limits, okay? So, and gradually this has to be reduced. So decrease it gradually. Okay, so it's all about treating the foreign companies on par with domestic companies, just like what we have discussed in case of import. The imported product you treat on the similar or as similar to the domestic product, okay? So exactly the same thing is what we are actually discussing here. I hope you understood. So decrease gradually later, treat on par with domestic companies in terms of export obligation, in terms of domestic content requirement, etc. So I hope this is clear for all of you. So that's about TRIMS. Now what we need to do, now we need to discuss about this GATS, General Agreement on Trade and Services we'll discuss, and non-agriculture market access also we will discuss, okay? So that's done. That is simple. TRIMS is not that important. It is related to investment. Now we will go for GATS. Okay, so what is this? General Agreement on Trade and Services, okay? So General Agreement on Trade in Service. So TRIMS, trade related investment measures, okay? So General Agreement on Trade and Services. So here under this, trade and service should be progressively liberalized. Everything what we are doing, we are obviously liberalizing everything. Before also, the relaxation was there in when it comes to imports also relaxation, and finally reducing tariff barriers. It's all about liberalizing, right? So the trade in services should be trade and services. I'll tell you what are the 4 different types of service, different modes of service. Four are there, okay? So trade and services should be progressively liberalized. Progressively liberalized, okay? So there are 4 modes. You just need to understand this 4 modes. From this also you can get a prelims question. So the mode 1 means cross-border trade, okay? So here it's cross-border trade or supply. So cross-border trade or supply. For example, BPO, okay? So BPO will come here. So there's a first category. Second category, mode 2. Mode 2 means consumption abroad. I'll explain this. Consumption abroad. See, what is the example here? Example is tourism, right? So for consuming this, people are going abroad. So that is why tourism, right? So see, people are going abroad means it's actually a kind of importing service. We have discussed, when we discussed about balance of payment, I've told you, if an Indian tourist is going out, okay, how can you put it in terms of import and export? It is actually importing, right? How and why? Because when you're going abroad, what is actually happening? The dollar is going out, right? So when the forex outflow is there, I hope you understood. So outflow is there means it is import. When you're importing only, you need to pay to some other country, right? Exactly the same thing is actually what happening. You are getting a service from some other country by going there, so you are paying. That means outflow of dollar is there. So Indian tourists going abroad is a kind of import. Similarly, when a foreigner is coming to India, that is actually export. Why? Because forex is coming to India. When forex will come, when you are exporting, the payment will come in terms of forex, right? So when a foreigner is coming, it is actually considered as export. When an Indian is going, it is considered as import. So I hope it is clear. So it is actually an import of service if it is going. Now what about mode 3? Mode 3 is commercial presence, okay? So when you talk about commercial presence, it's all about MNCs. So the foreign companies which are present in India, for example, okay, the foreign banks like Citibank, all these are example, okay? So MNCs, that means foreign companies. So the foreign company subsidiaries which are offering services, etc., will come here, right? So foreign banks like HSBC, Citibank, etc., will come under this. Now what about mode 4? Mode 4 is presence of natural persons. So you need to write these words, okay? Presence of natural persons. What does that mean? It is basically movement of people. This is what the job visas, etc., okay? So movement of people. So here mode 1 related to cross-border trade or supply. This example. Mode 2, consumption abroad, going abroad for consuming certain things, right? Tourism is a clear-cut example for that. You're going abroad, you're consuming, okay? So it is actually considered as import. Okay, foreigner coming to India, it is considered as export. So balance of payment, we have discussed that in detail, okay? And then in case of depreciation also, when we have drawn the demand supply curve, I've told you who create demand, who creates supply. At that point of time also, we have taken up this example of foreign tourists visiting India and Indian tourists going abroad, okay? So Indian tourists going abroad, it is actually demand of dollar because he need to make the payment in terms of dollar. So it increased demand of dollar. And foreign tourists coming to India, he is coming up with dollar, okay? He need a rupee. So supply of dollar is coming to India, okay? So I hope that is clear. Then mode 3, commercial presence, the MNCs, foreign companies presence. Mode 4, that is a presence of natural person, okay? That is basically the movement of people. Now we will discuss non-agricultural market access NAMA. So this is the fifth one, right? So started off with agreement on agriculture, then we have discussed about TRIPS, then we have discussed about TRIMS, then we have discussed about GATS, now we are discussing about NAMA. So this is the fifth one, and this is the last one under the agreement. So I hope the agreements are clear. So non-agriculture market access, okay? So it deals with, so it obviously deals with agreement on agriculture is there. So this is going to deal with, as its name indicate, non-agricultural products, okay? So it deals with reduction of tariffs on items that are not covered under agreement on agriculture. Okay, so agreement on agriculture, for example, manufactured products, fuels, mining products, fish, forestry products, etc. So those items which are not coming under agreement on agriculture will come under this NAMA. Okay, so non-agricultural market access. Now here you have to, everywhere you have to reduce the tariffs, right? So here also you have to reduce the tariff. You have to reduce the tariff by what percent? Here it is basically based on Swiss formula. I'll explain what is Swiss formula, okay? So tariffs to be reduced as per Swiss formula. Swiss formula, it's basically a non-linear formula. It means, you know, countries which have higher tariffs have to reduce it higher level, higher percentage, okay, and countries which is having lower tariffs have to reduce at lower percentage. So countries will reduce it differently. Higher tariff countries will reduce at a higher percentage. Lower tariff countries will reduce at a lower percentage. See, it can be same, let's say 10%, it can be 20% also, but that will not be enough here. Okay, I'll show you the example. So let's suppose you take country A and country B. Okay, so let's say tariff for here, country A is having high tariff, let's say 50%. Okay, high tariff is there. Then country B, 20% is there. The custom duty, okay, that's what you mean by tariff, right? Tariff barriers in terms of custom duty, etc. Import duties, simply. Okay, so that you can discourage the imports. So country A is discouraging imports more by imposing more tariffs. So as per this formula, what you need to do, country A have the more reduction commitment than country B. I'll show you here. There are two ways. Right, first possibility of reduction is both can be same percentage. So let's say, let's take the first case, both are reducing at 10%. So 10% reduction and 10% reduction. Okay, so same percentage reduction. So what will happen? 10 here there will be a 10% reduction. So this will become, you know, 45. Okay, so 10% of 50 is 5. So this will become 45, and this will become, you know, 18. Okay, or let's take 50%. So let's take a common, that is 50%. Okay, so let's say 50%. See, what I'm saying is, I hope you understood. I'm going to tell you the three different possible ways in which you can reduce tariff. One way is, this is the normal situation. Let's take this as a normal situation. Okay, 50% and 20%. Now imagine one possibility is you can keep flat 10% for both. Here it is 20, so reduce it to 10. Here it is 50, reduce it to 10. Okay, so both are now equal, reduced to 10. Both are same. That is one way. So that is only one fixed rate for both these countries A and B. Okay, so that is one way. Second way is actually both have to be reduced by 50%. Both have to be reduced by 50%. So here it will reduce 50%. That means now it is 25. Okay, here it will reduce 50%. That means 10%. Right? I hope this is clear. So here both are reduced by the same percentage. So higher tariff, this doesn't matter. Lower tariff also doesn't matter. Both have to reduce by 50%. What is the third possibility? Third possibility, I am saying the country A is having high tariff. So what country A have to do? Country A have to reduce at maximum percentage, 50%, and country B have to reduce at a slightly minimum percentage, let's say 25%. So what will happen? Country A will reduce at 50%, that means it will become 25 now. Country B will reduce at slightly lesser. If it was 50%, it is 10, we have already seen. So here it is 25, so that that becomes 15%. Okay, so this is what you mean by Swiss formula. Swiss formula means the countries having higher tariff will have more reduction commitment, and countries having lower tariff have less reduction commitment. Okay, as per Swiss formula. So I hope this is clear for all of you. Okay, so here see what I'm saying is there are three ways in which you can reduce this, right? So what I've done in the first case, both A and B reduced to 10%. See here, this may be a developing country. High tariff is imposed because to prevent import, to support the domestic content, okay, so the domestic market, etc. So that's why it is required for developing country. But now when you immediately make it to 10%, it is going to affect the domestic products drastically. Okay, that may lead to deindustrialization, etc. So the domestic industry will suffer. So this is not desirable for developing countries. Now here, if you see, both have equal reduction commitment. That is also not considered desirable. Okay, so here drastic 25% it came to, here 10%. Okay, now if you see here, this is what actually you mean by Swiss formula. Later the countries like Argentina, Brazil, India will change this formula. Swiss formula will change. I'll tell you what is that change which actually happened when we discuss in the next session. That is what, if you remember in the previous session, I've actually told you the reduction commitment for developing countries is actually 2/3 of developing. This is 2/3 of the developed. Okay, so the Swiss formula will be changed to this, like less than full responsibility. Not completely you are reducing. So whatever commitment is there for developed countries, not exactly the same, less than full reciprocity you will do, developing countries will do. Okay, that's what you mean by 2/3. So we have already discussed that. In the coming session also I'll discuss that in detail. So I hope this is clear, this three type. Basically what I want to tell you here is this only, Swiss formula. So here it is basically based on Swiss formula. So that's about the session. I hope you understood everything that we have discussed today. If you have any doubt in any of the videos that we have discussed so far, you can get in touch with me here. That's my Instagram ID. Okay, or you can join the Telegram channel. You will get all my videos over there. Everything is there. Or you can see here, this is a Telegram channel, or this is the Instagram ID. These two are my Facebook page. You can get in touch with me in any of this. If you want to learn economy with me or history with me or general studies, any subjects, you can, if you need regular classes, you can get in touch with me, or the online classes are available with StudyIQ. You will get all those classes. Still, you will get my YouTube videos in this Telegram channel. Okay. So I hope you understood everything that we have discussed. So see you guys. Thank you.